We all know great writing when we read it. It instantly makes you feel immersed in the story and captivated enough to want to continue reading more. We've all had that feeling where we've read a sentence that was just so well composed that it emotionally moved us. And ultimately, all writers aspire to have readers connect with their writing on that level. But being able to recognize great writing is one thing, and it can be a challenge to figure out how to replicate that in your own work. I'll admit, even as a professional book editor, sometimes I struggle to articulate exactly what makes someone's writing so good. It's the type of thing that if you know it's good, you know. But I had the pleasure of editing some really incredible novels recently. Shout out to all of my amazing clients who might be watching this. And this made me really sit back and think about what makes these writers' prose so strong and how we can take those techniques and tactics and apply them to our own works. So in doing this, I figured out 3 foolproof strategies to instantly elevate your own writing. And I'm pretty sure at least some of these tips are going to be things you've never heard before, at least in the way I'm going to present them. As a bonus, I'm also going to be showing excerpts from books by best-selling authors who are using these strategies so you can really see them in action and come to recognize them as you are also reading. For all the book writers or aspiring authors watching this, welcome to my channel. If you haven't yet joined our amazing community, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Every week, I either post videos with tactical writing tips like this one, or I talk about the publishing industry as my background is in Big 5 publishing. Before we get into the tips, one quick thing that would really help me out a lot is if you hit that thumbs up button. It's a small, silly thing, but it helps out my channel a lot, and I really appreciate it. The first strategy to elevate your writing to that of a best-selling author is to make every word matter. There are 2 words that I often find myself using when I am describing strong fiction writing. Those are authoritative and intentional. The reason that I use these words is because a great writer establishes trust with the reader from the very beginning of their story. We trust them to carry us through the entire narrative and deliver a captivating reading experience. But how do you make your own writing come across as intentional and authoritative and establish this trust with the reader? It comes down to ensuring each and every sentence and each and every word packs a punch and holds its weight in the story. We must have the sense that everything that is on the page is there for a very specific reason, and that it is all contributing to the overarching story. There should be no fluff or filler material. So on a scene level, this means that each and every scene meaningfully contributes either to developing the plot or developing our understanding of a character that we care about. Your manuscript shouldn't be full of scenes that are inconsequential, where nothing significant really happens. You should also be careful to avoid extraneous information delivery or overlong descriptions that aren't really enhancing the reader's experience of the story. And on a sentence level, being intentional and authoritative in your prose means avoiding redundancy and being concise yet effective in what you're trying to convey. Choose your words meaningfully so that each one goes further in making your point. A challenge that you might consider is trying to say in 5 words what you originally were saying in 20. So let's take a look at a novel excerpt that illuminates this point. This is from The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and it's how the novel opens. 19 years before she decided to die, Nora Seed sat in the warmth of the small library at Hazeldean School in the town of Bedford. She sat at a low table staring at a chessboard. "Nora, dear, it's natural to worry about your future," said the librarian, Mrs. Elm, her eyes twinkling. Mrs. Elm made her first move, a knight hopping over the neat row of white pawns. "Of course, you're going to be worried about the exams, but you could be anything you want to be, Nora. Think of all that possibility. It's exciting." Notice that the author really only gives us 2 brief lines in the first paragraph introducing Nora and taking us into the setting before we dive right into her conversation with Mrs. Elm. There's truly no excess or filler material here. For instance, we don't see Mrs. Elm come up to Nora and ask to play chess with her. We don't see any greetings between them or any small talk. The author immediately takes us right into the most important part of their conversation. And this is how we know that this author is being very intentional in what they're showing us and we trust that they are going to carry us through this story with intentionality. If you've been enjoying my YouTube content, I am excited to let you know that there's a lot more available for you on my newsletter website, chapter-break.com. I've been building this out as a second hub for resources for writers just like you. I'm doing interviews with literary agents, best-selling authors, and I'm also providing deep dive content into specific editorial issues from my background as a developmental book editor. I have a freebie for anyone who's interested in signing up for the newsletter. It's called my Story Self-Assessment Worksheet. It's a resource I created to help you get unstuck with your current draft and figure out what you need to improve on the next draft to take it to the next level. The links to grab your free Story Self-Assessment Worksheet and check out Chapter Break are in the description below. The next way to instantly elevate your writing is to show small, authentic experiences. We all ultimately read to form a connection to the characters' journeys, to share in some human experience or emotion that is being explored through your story. And the best writers know how to convey some sort of truth through their characters' actions or comments that the reader can immediately relate to and connect with. Sometimes they're just really small or even mundane things that the characters are doing, things that we maybe don't even think about consciously, but once we see them on the page, we immediately understand what that author is talking about. These moments allow the reader to really connect with the characters and the story because we feel like we have been in that situation or we've seen someone in that situation, and we immediately understand exactly what that character is experiencing and going through. This can be as simple as a well-timed look that one character gives another. It can be a comment that a character makes to themselves internally. It could be a description of what a character is doing when nobody is watching them. Or it could be something that we see a character say aloud that we know doesn't align with how they actually feel. These little authentic moments where the character is showing their true self to the reader really allow us to engage more deeply with the story, and it's one thing that sets really strong writers apart from amateurs. Here's an excerpt from a novel that I really love called Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed that illustrates this point. Market Depot sold bone broths, truffle butters, smoothies from a station that was currently dark, and several types of nuts in bulk. The store was bright and empty, and the only open checkout lane was the one for 10 items or fewer. Next to a dried fruit section, Zara bent in her heels and held her dress down to retrieve a box of yogurt-covered raisins. $8? She quickly placed them back on the shelf and stood up. This is a relatively mundane moment of the character browsing the grocery store and then making a comment that the items are totally overpriced. But it captures a very specific experience and feeling that many readers can immediately connect with. It might call to mind a specific place that you yourself have shopped at. Little moments like this go a long way toward helping the reader establish a foundational connection with your characters and feel more invested in how their journeys pan out. My last tip to instantly elevate your writing is to use figurative language strategically. While there's nothing wrong with composing relatively simple, straightforward prose that is meant to be taken literally, most writers who are operating at the height of their craft leverage figurative language in one way or another. And many times their use of figurative language is what makes their writing so striking and memorable. If you need a quick refresher, figurative language includes devices like metaphors, similes, and personification, where you as an author are drawing two separate concepts together to help the reader understand an element of your story or a description element better. As an author, this is where you are drawing two concepts together to help the reader understand an element of your story in more depth and nuance. Now, I do give you this tip with caution because amateur writers sometimes attempt to elevate their prose by throwing in similes and metaphors that ultimately come across as overdone or cliche. For example, how many times have we heard phrasing that some character's eyes shone like the sun? Throwing in figurative language that isn't effective can actually have the opposite effect and make your writing weaker, and even in some cases, more derivative. But nailing figurative language and making it your own will undeniably make you a stronger storyteller and make readers more captivated by your prose. So let's look at an excerpt from a novel that includes figurative language. This is from Apples Never Fall by Leanne Moriarty. Two men and two women sat in the far corner of a cafe underneath the framed photo of sunflowers at dawn in Tuscany. They were basketball player tall, and as they leaned forward over the mosaic-topped round table, their foreheads almost touched. They spoke in low, intense voices, as if their conversation involved international espionage, which was incongruous in this small suburban cafe on a pleasant, summery Saturday morning with freshly baked banana and pear bread scenting the air and soft rock drifting languidly from the stereo to the accompaniment of the espresso machine's industrious hiss and grind. Were you able to find the simile in this passage? It comes when the author says that the group's voices sounded as if their conversation involved international espionage, which I think is a very effective way at conveying a sense of urgency or ominousness in the tone of their voices. This simile is especially effective because it contrasts so jarringly with the suburban cafe idyllic type setting. We know that the characters aren't literally talking about international espionage, but we're intrigued to learn what they are talking about and why they're having such an intense conversation in this cafe. Making unexpected comparisons like this can immediately make the reader more intrigued in your story and trust in you as a storyteller even more. I hope this helped you identify ways to make your own writing stronger and how to recognize strong writing in books that you're reading. Let me know in the comments who some of your favorite authors are whose prose you really admire. I'd love to hear any of your personal inspirations. And if you're looking for some more tips on strengthening your own prose, I have a video that goes into free ways to improve your writing, so definitely check that out. Before you head out, don't forget to check out all the great resources on my newsletter website and grab your free story self-assessment worksheet. The links to both are in the description below. And if you could hit that thumbs up button if you liked today's video, it would mean a lot to me. And hit subscribe if you haven't yet joined our amazing community. Thanks so much for watching and happy writing.